Welcome to the Gen Z Show. I am your host, James McLamb, and the Gen Z Show is brought to you by Generation Ziegler. And I'm joined today with my good friend Julia from Tennessee. How are you doing, Julia?
I'm doing well. Excited to be here today.
Well, we have a special guest with us today. Someone who, this was the first time that I had met Mr. Walter Kinzie. Now, Mr. Walter Kinzie is the founder of a company called Encore Live. And Encore Live is one of the biggest live event promoters in the world. They put on live concerts for artists like Garth Brooks, George Strait. You may have heard of those people before. They're kind of a big deal. Metallica, just to name a few. He puts on concerts and events for them, plus other events. He's even produced presidential inaugurations in the past. So he's got a lot of things going on for him. And he has a lot to share. Julia, what are some of the things that our audience is really going to want to hear from Mr. Kinzie?
Yes, Mr. Kinzie has a lot of amazing things to share. So many aspects of his story that I think can be really inspiring to all of our viewers. So we learn about his journey from a farm boy in Kansas to now a concert producer, producing some of the biggest events across the country. And what it's been like to pivot in the pandemic to virtual events and socially distanced events and how he's experienced that. And finally, he gives us some lessons for young people in the pandemic and how we can be confident in our futures, what we can look forward to in our futures. So I think lots of good points that we'll be able to take away from this today.
Listen, audience, you're going to want to listen to the entire interview with him and go to the website. We put him down below in the show notes as well, how to connect with him, because he's putting on some events in 2021 that you're going to want to see, that you're going to want to be a part of. He is really changing the face of entertainment and the way it is consumed in a live manner in the United States and what he's doing. Just brilliant what he's doing. And so I won't hold you in suspense any longer. Let's go straight to our interview with Mr. Walter Kinzie. Walter, welcome to the Gen Z Show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, and honored to be talking with y'all.
Well, I'm very excited to be able to talk with you today and to meet you today. Our good friend, our mutual friend, Andrew McCrae, highly recommended you last fall. Said I always ask my guests afterwards, hey, is there someone that you would recommend? And a lot of times I'll get a long list of folks, but Andrew was very specific. He only gave me two names, and yours was one of them. And he actually, after he sent it, he said, make sure you contact him as soon as you can because he's a busy guy. You want to get him on his schedule.
Yes, Andrew's awesome. I've known Andrew for 20 years, and I consider myself very blessed that I was one of the names that he gave you.
Well, thank you. Well, our audience may not be familiar with who you are and what you do. Just introduce yourself to our young audience of late teens, mid 20s, and tell them, who is Walter?
That's right. Grew up on a farm in Kansas. Former FFA member, was very involved in 4-H as well. Something that would never happen today, but I took out my first business loan whenever I was 7 years old to buy a pig, and my dad was my co-signer, and my banker made me give quarterly business reviews and talk about how my quote-unquote company was going. And 7 years old at the county fair, told my dad that I was going to produce concerts for a living. I think I actually told him first I was going to be a singer, and he said I better learn the business side of things because I may not have a future in singing. And he was right. I'm a terrible singer. But at 18, a fellow FFA member of mine was sick and always had wanted to produce a concert, and so I produced a concert to help raising money. And as a lot of small town members of the community, they were trying to raise money for him with a coffee can next to a cash register at a gas station, and he needed real money. He didn't need, a few $100. He needed real money. And so we threw a concert and raised him $71,000, and it verified for me at 18 that dream I had since 7 was something that I should be doing. And so today I'm 37 years old, married, have a couple kids. I started my company a decade ago. I had to have a kidney transplant whenever I was 20, and so that derailed any plans for college, put me massively in debt, and I went and got a full-time job, and so I just have a high school degree. I never was able to complete college. I went and got a full-time job. I got an apartment that cost $135 a month. I drove a car that when it was time to get rid of it, I couldn't even sell it to anybody, so I had to donate it. But I spent 7 years in corporate America, and making money to pay off all of my debts. And I started 20 years old without about $1 million in debt. And by the time I was 27, through renegotiating with lenders and different things like that, and then just being fiscally responsible, followed Dave Ramsey's teachings, I was debt free and had $500 to my name. That was the middle of December 2010, and I started my company with $500. Today, in 2020, we were the largest producer of concerts in the world. So we um, scaled very quickly, and we do private parties, corporate events, corporate conferences, things like a national FFA convention, sort of thing that my company would produce. And then we started doing live public shows in 2020, and through the pivot that we did, we became the largest concert producer in the world. So we're pretty excited about that.
Well, that's one of the things that I think would be interesting to our audience is how did you, I mean, the name of your company, Encore Live. I mean, so it applies right there. Those are live events. Well, we know that in 2020, almost everything live, went by the wayside. So, I
That's
mean,
right.
when you were faced with that possibility, what were the things going on in your mind? I mean, how did you pivot to recover and succeed like that?
Well, I think anybody that grows up on a farm, uh, pivoting is just part of your daily life. The plan never goes as it should when you're raising live animals or you're raising a crop. No one can sit down and say, okay, this year my corn is going to yield this because the weather's going to be perfect and we're never going to have any storms that are going to cause any problems. We're going to get just enough rain. And that never happens. As growing up on a farm, growing up in that lifestyle, I'm just equipped to pivot. And so we lost from March 6th to March 11th, we lost $40 million in business.
Ooh.
And I was losing $10 million a day. And it was a very, very painful few days. And this company I've been building for a decade was going away by the minute. I was literally watching this thing slip away. And I told my team, I took a couple days off and went fishing, took my daughters fishing. And I told my team, we had a call on March 13th, which was a Friday. And I told my team, I said, we can lick our chops or we can lick our wounds. This whole country is in a downward spiral right now, and everyone's going to be freaking out. And so we're going to look for opportunity, or we're going to feel sorry for ourselves. What do you guys want to do? And so we made the decision to look for opportunities. We pivoted and we did some virtual stuff, March, April, early May. And I'll tell you, we were actually producing the Kansas FFA convention, and it was going to be completely virtual. And I made the decision to drive around. We have a farm in South Dakota, so we were staying on the farm in South Dakota. I made a decision to drive to every single state officer's home in Kansas and interview them as part of the content that we were creating for the Kansas FFA convention. And in doing so, I remember this was on May 11th, Monday, May 11th. I drove through a town on my way to Kansas, drove through a town called Winter, South Dakota. And there was this beautiful, beautiful drive-in theater. And it was still operational. And as a kid, that's how I consumed entertainment. We didn't have When Aladdin came out, we went to the drive-in movie theater in Coffeyville, Kansas, and that's where I watched the movie. And so for me, it clicked immediately. I'm like, wait, people can be in their cars and go to these shows. There's something here. I drove 7 more miles down the road, and there was another drive-in theater in Gregory, South Dakota. Beautiful facility. And I pulled over and I called the president of my company, and I said, Jesse, I want you to look online. There's got to be 30 or 40 drive-in theaters still operating in the country. Let's see if we can pull them all together, and we'll start throwing virtual concerts, but where people can get out of their house and go
And still be safe.
and still be safe. Stay in quarantine if you wanted to. If you could get from your front door of your house to the front door of your car without talking to anybody, if I could do everything the way I wanted to, which was a completely touchless system, where there'd be no handling of tickets, anything like that, then let people bring a cooler, then we could stay in quarantine and still go to concerts. So I get a few hundred miles down the road. I'm driving around Kansas, and these drive-in theaters it was like God was just like screaming at me, there's an opportunity here. And so I stopped at a truck stop in Salina, Kansas, and I Googled drive-in movie theaters in America. And I found a website that listed 330 of them that were still operating. And
There's
I was just
that many theaters still going on.
There's that many. And I was just floored. Every one of them I was counting parking spaces. I stopped at every one along the way, and I counted parking spaces. And I was averaging around 500 parking spaces at each of these theaters. And then I started thinking, all right, 6 people to a car. And so these numbers started getting really staggering. And before long, I realized that with the amount of theaters that were in America, multiply that by the number of seats. The largest stadium in the world seats 114,000 people. And all of a sudden I had 250,000 people that could come to my shows. And then before long, it was up to 400,000 people. And so we started calling these places. They all agreed to do exclusive deals with us. And we promised them a certain amount of content every year. And so we signed all these theaters up into these exclusive agreements, and we started testing it. And through my work, I've got a pretty good relationship with Garth Brooks. And so he was the first one. I called him on May 14th, and I said, Garth, I want to tell you about this idea I have. And I want you to tell me if you think it's something that you think I'm crazy or you think bands would want to be a part of. And wait just one second here. Sorry about that. And so I called, we had a great conversation. We talked for about an hour. He asked me a bunch of questions, and he ended it with, I'm in. I want to be your first. And for an artist like that, I want to just put that in perspective. Most artists that have any hits at all wouldn't go play even a first-time festival because you don't know how it's going to go, and they don't want to be put in a bad situation. And so then that's most artists. Then you have Garth that's on a level that's different than any other artist in the history of music. And for him to say, not only do I want to do it, I want to be the first, was a very profound moment for me, because that was going to change everything for me. And so we had the idea on May 11th. We called Garth on May 14th. Garth went on Good Morning America on June 11th, exactly 30 days later, on June 11th, to announce to the world that this business had been created and he was going to be a part of it. And we had our first show 45 days later on June 27th. We had 350,000 people come out to the show, 3 times the largest stadium in the world came out to our first show. We did 4 concerts total last summer. Blake Shelton, with Gwen Stefani and Trace Adkins. Then we did another show with Metallica, and we did another show with Kane Brown and a handful of really strong up-and-coming artists like Lauren Elena and Granger Smith. 4 shows, 905,000 people came out to our 4 shows. 67% of them are in rural America, fully operational in the United States and Canada. We've expanded into Ireland. So when our first show hits, it's a country festival we'll be announcing here in a few weeks. When our first show hits in April of this year, we'll be in 3 countries, about 1,500 venues, have a capacity of a little over 1.2 million people, 10 times the largest stadium in the world.
So where are they being filmed at? Where's the actual artist at this time?
Great question. So last year we pre-recorded all of our shows, and we did a soundstage in Nashville for 3 of them. And then for Metallica, it was amazing. We rented a vineyard in Napa, and we literally set them up on the side of a hill on a gravel road. And they did the whole concert from a gravel road with all these rolling hills and vineyards behind them. We did it right as the sun was going down. It was absolutely incredible. Metallica, like you'd never ever seen them before. You got to think about that for a second. We had 230,000 people come out to see Metallica. 230,000. This band is 4 decades old, one of the biggest, most famous rock bands of all time. And they had more people come out to their concert when they were playing in a vineyard than any stadium they've ever played in the history of their career. And so it's remarkable. Now, this year, we're adding the element of live. And so we're going to pre-record. Well, we just did the UFC fight a few weeks ago, the Conor McGregor fight. And we did that live from, we did that live from
Saudi
Dubai.
Arabia. Yeah, Dubai.
That's right. And we did it live from Dubai, didn't have any issues. Beautiful. We did it coast to coast in the United States at our venues. And so
Michael Chandler is a big friend of ours and was one of the original guests on this show. He won his debut fight UFC that night. So
that's right. That's right. And so then we're going to do our first few programs in 2021. Will be a slight delay to them, but then by June we'll be completely live for all of our shows, and we're hoping that by even the middle of the summer we'll be able to have fans at the actual concert where the show's happening, as well as in our roughly 1,500 venues around North America and Ireland.
You said something that you said to your team: look for opportunities, and I'll repeat that. So that I like to have a statement every time that I tell folks you need to hashtag this and tweet it. That was good.
Yeah.
Look for opportunities or look for.
Yeah. I told them they could lick their wounds or they could lick their chops, and we can either look for opportunities or we can be sorry for ourselves. Those were kind of the 2 main statements I told them. But our rally cry this year has been sorry about that. Our rally cry this year has been lick our chops. LYC. We've been we hashtag LYC on everything with the company.
All right. There's your hashtag, guys. LYC. Hashtag it.
Love that. There was something you said that stuck with me about at the beginning of the pandemic, just feeling like your business was slipping away from you. And then, as we've already heard, now you're revolutionizing the way that we experience entertainment. More people than ever are able to participate in these experiences all over the country. So I know a lot of people my age and my generation, it's hard to imagine anything beyond this pandemic. I mean, graduation ceremonies are being canceled, prom is being canceled, anything you could think of that we really look forward to at this time in our lives. It feels like it's slipping away from us. So how would you encourage young people to not just imagine their future, but to look forward to that future beyond the pandemic?
Well, this is, that's a very good question. And I tell you, I remember it wasn't that long ago I was that age, and it just feels like that is life, and that's the way it is. And I tell you, those are important memories that I'm glad I have, and I would encourage them to find unique ways to still make those celebrations happen. There are safe ways that you can do it, even if it's just with a handful of people that you love and care about. There are still really special ways that they could spin this to where they actually had the more special encounter than the traditional way. For generations, we've been doing it one way, and they have their moment to do it their way. And so I encourage them to do that. And number 2, I can tell you that life is fast. This time will pass. And in fact, I'm reminded of a quote that a good friend of mine that has actually since passed on once told me. And he said, life is not too short. it's too fast, and the only thing you should never do is waste it. And he passed away at 28, and I'll remember that quote forever. Life is not too short, it's too fast, and the only thing you should never do is waste it. And so don't let this time be a paralyzing time. Don't let this time feel like you're in handcuffs and you can't do anything. Look for ways to create those memories that will last a lifetime, and you will emerge from this with a peace and a comfort that will allow you to propel that into a successful collegiate career, or whatever that next phase in life might be. So, but this will pass, and we don't know yet. I'm reading reports about movies and concerts that are getting canceled. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, unfortunately, just announced that they've canceled, and that's very heartbreaking. I feel for those kids that are seniors in high school. This was a chance for them to show a steer, show a pig, and that moment is gone now. And so, but there will be other ways, and there will be other things. And I can tell you, from someone that missed college because of a kidney transplant, that 3 years that I was in the hospital seemed like an eternity. And now it just seems like a blip on the radar. Like it was just a moment, and it was gone. But I had my own little individual pandemic whenever I was 20, and I missed my collegiate career because of it. So, but everything's still fine.
It's like that experience probably gave you a great foundation to be able to look at the situation that happened to your business last year more optimistically than probably most of us. Is that a fair assessment?
A very fair assessment. That's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning. I feel like if you're raised on a farm, you're raised to pivot. You're raised to make the most out of a situation, whatever, however good or bad it might be. I mean, these growing up a farm kid, you know about the worst of times. You know about the hardest of times. You know about great sacrifice. You know about life and death. You know that, if my job in high school was at a fast food restaurant, if I call in sick, someone's still going to flip those burgers. But if I called in sick whenever I had my cattle operation as a senior, as a high school student, I couldn't call in sick. The cattle still had to be taken care of, and it's life or death. And so you learn how to pivot. I tell you, it was. I feel incredibly blessed that I grew up on a farm. I feel like I hit the lottery. The work ethic that emerges from a kid that has to live that lifestyle, gets to live that lifestyle, is a work ethic that will no doubt make them successful in their professional careers. And at a time when when I was growing up, no one had work ethic issues, and now everyone has work ethic issues. And these farm kids are going to be the ones that emerge and actually have the opportunity to be the most successful, because they get hard work, they get sacrifice, and they get that no matter what, the job has to get done. So
That is so true on that. So you've worked with a lot of big celebrities over the years and had an opportunity to observe them and their success. What lessons have you learned from them that would really be encouraging or helpful for our audience? I'm sure some of them have got great stories that you've been able to learn from, and I'd be interested in hearing what those are for our audience.
yeah, I feel very blessed. You name it, I've probably worked with them in live music. We've just had an incredible run the last decade. And so but I'll tell you, it goes back to work ethic. I can predict almost without error. I can predict how long an artist is going to last in their career by watching how they work outside of the concert. A really good example of that is when I work with George Strait, he's at his sound checks. When I work with Metallica, they're at their sound check. When I work with Garth Brooks, he's at his sound check. The most successful bands, Fleetwood Mac's another one, the most successful bands that I've ever worked with, they don't skip the things that all the other bands skip whenever you get famous. They still go, they still care about the audio that's coming out of that microphone for that person that's in that crowd, even though they played in front of millions and millions of people, they still care. uh, ZZ Top, Bon Jovi, a couple of the other ones like that. But then I work with some of these other ones where they just send their team to go do sound check. They send their team to go load in. They send their team to do all the work, and they just show up to sing the songs. And for whatever reason, they have one hit and they go away. And it's because they got to a point and they thought they didn't have to work anymore. And so that's one of the I attended every single show that we did this summer, and I studied the audience, and I studied the reaction. I study how easy it is for them to get in, how much they were enjoying it. When did they honk their horns? When did they not honk their horns? When were they hooping and hollering? When did I expect them to do something they didn't do it? I try to analyze why. We put in the work, and that's what's going to make us successful. And that is, those habits are very relevant even in music, where it's not a farm, it's not crops, it's not cattle, but the people that work the hardest are still the ones that are the most successful.
Isn't it such an important point that you're bringing up and making, that no matter what you're doing, those same fundamental principles to success apply, of hard work, of showing up on time, of giving it your all. I think sometimes people think celebrities, because they just get there alone on talent, which we know talent is a significant part, but so much more than that.
Well, and you hear stories about Tom Brady being in the film room Monday after a game at 5 a.m. And you hear those stories, and it's no doubt that they've had the success they've had. You look at, there's a principle called 10,000 hours. The Beatles refused to play in front of any fan, period, until they had practiced 10,000 hours together. Michael Jordan made it a habit that he shot 10,000 baskets in the off season, every single season. Even leading into his final season, he shot 10,000 shots before his first practice as the team, when they would come back together. And so, I mean, that is, and I tell you, I work with some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, billionaires. Before the pandemic, we would throw 5, 10, 15, sometimes $20 million parties, sometimes even more than $20 million. And so, I mean, we're talking about, a birthday party that lasts 7 hours or 5 hours, and they're spending $15 million in those 5 hours. It's a completely different concept than most people could ever understand. But I tell you, I work closely with those families, and they've got more resources and more opportunities than a lot of folks have in life, and they still are working hard. They're still sending emails at 6 a.m., sending emails at 11 p.m. And I believe that people need to take time to rejuvenate, to take a break, for sure. But the work ethic doesn't ever stop. And when that stops, you're done. It's over.
That kind of leads into a question I had, which is, in working with all of these big names, kind of seeing what they're like behind the scenes, did you ever struggle with imposter syndrome or just confidence, especially starting out? And how would you recommend that young people can kind of overcome those confidence issues? Does work ethic have anything to do with that, or what would you say?
Well, work ethic has to do with it, but with any industry, there's a jargon that goes along with it. I'll tell you what I did and what I'd recommend anybody do. When I was 18 and booking that first show for my friend Corey that was sick, I was I called. There was a facility in Parsons, Kansas called the Parsons Municipal Auditorium. They were known for having some concerts from time to time. And then there was another place in Salina, Kansas, that was a kind of where all the state basketball and track meets and stuff happened. They were known for doing some concerts from time to time. So I called up there and I asked them, I said, listen, I'm going to start calling these agents and managers. Like, what do I need to know? Like, what are some terms that they might throw out that I may not understand, but if I'm proficient in it, then I just become one of them. And so I learned the language, and before I ever made my first phone call, I put the time in to learn the language. So when I made that first phone call, I was trusted because I was talking the talk that mattered, and I knew my work ethic on the back end. I would walk the walk, but I just had to get bands bought. I was 18 years old. I was trying to buy these bands that command major money, and they've had a ton of success. They're not going to take a chance on a kid like me.
Mm.
And so I learned all the things that were important about the business, but I've never quit learning. And I think that comes from being on a farm as well, that I'm much more adapt to learn in the scenario than learn from a textbook. And so anyway, and that's where it is. I think the other thing that you need to know, or that I've tried to embody, is your childhood friends are great and they're going to be there forever, but you need to be surrounding yourself with the people that have the life that you want, and you got to work really hard to network and get around those people. I wanted to be a successful businessman. I cared less about being successful in entertainment as much as I just cared. I wanted people to come to work for me. And when they left this company, they were empowered to go and lead their own businesses, or they had the tools necessary to be successful in their next career. I've always judged myself on how successful the people are that leave the company as much as the people that have stayed. And so as I've looked at it, I've always I heard a speaker at Kansas State University one time at my sister's graduation talk about surround yourself with the five people that you most want to be like. And so, whether it helped me or hurt me, I chose to just surround myself with five really strong business people, and I versus really strong concert promoters. Probably slowed me down in the success of my concert business, but overall, we're running a really sound business that even in a pandemic, we've survived when, as heartbreaking as it is, millions of my competitors have gone out of business. But we've ran a really sound business this whole time. And so anyway, and so you got to decide that if you want to be an astronaut, you got to figure out how to get yourself around five people that work for NASA or SpaceX or something like that. If you want to be a farmer, you need to surround yourself with five farmers that are doing it right and are successful and continue to win even in the hardest of times. If you want to be a news anchor, you got to get to where you can surround yourself with news anchors, and that's what I've done. I've worked really hard even in my early 20s of building relationships with people and letting them know that if you'll let me in, if you'll mentor me, if you'll give me advice, I'll be a successful business person because you did. And along the way, people have moved out of my five and other people have moved in, and that's okay. People change and things change. And so but I constantly am nurturing my five.
Wow. You mentioned earlier your quote that you're going to mention remember forever, that life is not too short but too fast. What is another piece of best advice that you've been given? We ask this question to everyone, and everybody always goes, "Oh, it's a hard question." But I found that it's really not a hard question because people know immediately this is the best advice that I've ever been given.
Um, I'm going to think about that for a second, and I'll um, the things that come to mind at first are quotes like "whatever it takes," and really, I've built my whole life around being gritty, and there's a phenomenal TED talk about grit, and there's a 6-minute version of it and a 12-minute version of it. They're both phenomenal, and it's this school teacher that just talks about the thing that will separate success from failure is grit. And a lot of people get in, and particularly in this Instagram world and this social media world, this TikTok world, a lot of people get in for that instant gratification and that instant reaction. I watch so many people take jobs or start companies, and just for the to be able to Instagram or put on TikTok how successful they are. Hey, I'm here at this moment in time. I must be doing something right. But behind the scenes, they're they're a duck in water, and they're doing everything they can to keep their head above water. Um, and a lot of times the luster of that Instagram post wears off, and so your desire to move on to the next thing that's thrilling steps in, and all of a sudden you look up and you got a resume and you've had 6 jobs in 4 years that shows that you have no loyalty, you have no ability to stay anywhere long enough to do any type of good. You probably have a whole bunch of people pissed off at you because they spent enough money
Mhm.
investing in you, and you're not sticking with it. And the people at my company that make the most money are the ones that have grit. I've got a woman that started as an intern, and now she is making life changing money. She's easily the breadwinner in her family, but she's had grit this whole time, and through the good times, the bad times, it was never about what how popular she looked on social media. It was about, I'm going to stick with this and make sure that I win. And she literally started as an intern, and she's done so much to help build us into what we are. And so I guess that's a really long-winded answer to say there's a TED Talk about grit. You should go watch it. But I believe that the fundamental reason why people have success or they don't is all around one word, and that's grit. You either got it or you don't.
How can our audience connect with what you're doing, the concerts? How are they going to be able to find that this summer when they kick in? Because I want to watch them. I want to go to them. Where am I going to be able to find these theaters that are doing this?
So EncoreNights.com, EncoreNights.com. You can go in there, and I think my team's got us set up with all this really awesome technology. But I think you can text something to, just go to EncoreNights.com and you can sign up, and it will make you aware of any pending announcements that are coming. We're going to hit the gas with these announcements. Starting at the beginning of March. And so our first show will be in April, our second show will be in May, and then we'll start cranking out multiple shows a month. We're actually going to be doing 2 shows in March, or one show in March as well, but it'll be a sports related event. And so go to EncoreNights.com, and you can learn about all of our pending shows, and stay in the loop and sign up. And we're implementing a really interesting ticketing platform this year that you can earn credits if your friends go to the show, and you can make it to where ultimately you never have to pay to go to any of the shows, because of the rewards programs that we're putting into place. And so it'll be a really incredible time uh, uh, to be able to see great music. And the bad news keeps rolling in on these big festivals that are shutting down for another year. We're going to have great music, and we're going to have great experiences, and it is an unreal experience. Imagine pulling into like a Walmart parking lot, and there's 1,000 cars there, and everyone's tailgating, and everyone's blaring the exact same song on their radios. It is just a really cool nostalgic experience, that is just a ton of fun. And so I recommend that everyone should come out, and we're making it easier than ever. Most of our venues are in rural America, and so we're not making you drive hundreds of miles to the big city to see a great show. You got to find the one closest to you. 148 million Americans live within 20 miles of one of our venues. So
Wow.
uh,
Is it only
we're
going to be at drive-through theaters now, or is there opportunities
no,
then for like
no.
Walmart to put up a big screen in their parking lot? When you said that, I had this vision of my local Walmart with a big screen on the side of the wall there.
Well, it may not be Walmart, but there's a really popular brand that's going to be doing exactly that. And so
Here first, people.
we haven't announced it yet, but there's this is the first time I've even whispered it publicly, but there's a brand like Walmart that will have these shows set up in all of their parking lots. And so we'll have about 300-ish drive-in movie theaters, and then we'll have around 1,000 traditional movie theaters that we're gonna place everybody in kind of pods.
Mhm.
And then we'll have a couple hundred additional kind of pop up retail outlet type of locations where there's already 1,000 parking spots there, and now it's just time to put up a screen and blare some music. So,
Walter, you're kind of bringing back that nostalgic Americana, of going to the theater and it being a family affair, almost a community affair. You're really bringing that back.
well, and I tell you what, and I appreciate you saying it. There is some intent here, but I have really enjoyed, for as long as small town America has been around, small town America has had to drive to the big city to get the best entertainment, and now it's the exact opposite.
Ooh.
The big city has to drive to rural America, and so I can't tell you how many mayors I've talked to this summer, how many small business owners I've talked to, where restaurants that were just counting on this year being gone because of COVID, and all of a sudden they're having some of the best days in the history of the restaurant because I put up this concert that has brought thousands of people to the area. And I mean, most of these towns we're in, they only have a few hundred people that live in them.
Mm-hmm.
And now 1,200 people show up to a concert. Well, that gas station's going to have the best night it's ever had. Those restaurants are going to have the best night they've ever had. Those hotels and motels are going to have the best night they've ever had. And we're doing it over and over and over again. And so there's been a revitalization of rural America that's happening in general because of COVID. 1 million people have left San Francisco. 2 million people have moved out of New York City. And, some guy in Fort Worth, Texas is putting on concerts everywhere. So there's been this revitalization of rural America, and whatever small part of it I've played, I'm very proud of that because I grew up in a town with 150 people in Edna, Kansas, and it makes me proud. We set a temporary drive-in up in my farm in Kansas, and we set one up on our farm in South Dakota, and made little small business owners out of it. And so anyway,
Wow.
it was really, really cool. And we had 330 operating theaters last year. 305 of them were single units owned by one person, and this was their livelihood. And so it was thrilling to be a part of something that brought just so much revenue and so much opportunity to all these small businesses.
Oh, wow. This has been fun. This has really been fun. And exciting to hear and stuff. If our audience just wanted to, connect with you personally, do LinkedIn the best place? Where would they find a spot to connect with you?
LinkedIn is kind of the only place. Everything else is managed by other people, but LinkedIn is the one thing that I manage. And so if you want to catch me, you want to talk to me, just find me on LinkedIn, and happy to engage. And I try to get to everyone that sends me a note on LinkedIn and at least either tell them something. So anyway, by all means, reach out. Would love to hear from anybody that wants to have a conversation.
We'll put a link to his LinkedIn address in the show notes. So if you look down, people look down. I always get this wrong because it's, it's mirrored and my fingers are going the wrong way. You'll see it in the show notes. Thank you again for your time today, for sharing with us and getting us excited about what's to come, especially for those members of our audience who, maybe they're still depressed. There's still some. I have a senior who is missing out on half of his junior year and his entire senior year, it looks like, and to have these opportunities to see that things are maybe different, but they can be even better. I love this.
That's right. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate your time, and happy to talk to y'all whenever. So best of luck to everybody. Keep your chin up, stay gritty. It's all going to be great.
And thank you, Gen Z audience.